There have been plenty of serial killer couples, but you could argue that the Wests were the worst of couples. Fred and Rose West were even more vile. These were not natural-born killer types or youngsters lost in the madness of a killing spree. This terribly odd couple tortured, mentally abused, and murdered many young female victims, including their own children in what certainly deserves to be called a house of horrors. Welcome to True Stories, join our family, and let us explore some of the most interesting true crime stories. If you enjoy, don't forget to give the video a like and subscribe. Let's get into it. Fred West was born on September 29, 1941, in a small idyllic village in England. Rosemary West was born in Devon on November 29, 1953. Like most serial killers, can anything that happened in their childhoods explain them turning into torturers and killers? We think you'll agree that the answer is absolutely yes. Fred was the youngest of 7 children, and he was doted on by his mother. Some reports state that the doting went way too far, and his mother had an incestuous relationship with him. Although after his arrest, Fred's brother, Doug West, told the press, "None of us was ever abused in any way by anybody." In spite of this, after his arrest Fred privately told the social worker he had slept with his mother, but didn't think there was anything wrong with it. He also told police that his father had relationships with very young girls and his own sisters. His father also taught him how to have sex with sheep. We can now understand where Fred got his disgusting behaviors. In this case, the saying, "like father like son," definitely applies. However, Doug says that these are just crazy fantasies and life was normal for the family. Fred also said he was made to cut the throats of pigs, something Doug also says is just one of Fred's lies. Another person who knew Fred as a boy said this about him: he was a bit cheeky, and he was probably naive and easily led. At 17, Fred had a motorcycle accident which left him in a coma for 7 days. His IQ was said to be only 84. 2 years later, he was hit hard in the face by a guy after groping a girlfriend. Knee fell 2 floors and his already damaged head was hit again. This head injury might explain what happened later in his life, as head traumas can do strange things to people, including affecting moral judgment and inhibitions. In fact, a document on Earth shows the family saying Fred's personality totally changed and he suddenly started lying, bragging, boasting, and stealing. Shortly after these accidents, Fred's 13-year-old younger sister told her mum that Fred had been raping her for 6 months and she was impregnated. When asked, Fred said that he'd been molesting girls for a long time, saying, "Doesn't everybody do it?" This should have been a red flag and a sign that Fred needed to be removed from the streets. He was a danger? The fact that he didn't doing was wrong is concerning. Fred never went to prison as his sister refused to testify in court. Fred also impregnated another young girl who was a friend of the family. Yet again, the justice system failed the community. One thing is for sure, Fred certainly became the black sheep of this farming family. And now Rose, allegedly both Rose's parents were mentally ill, and her mother even went through electroconvulsive therapy when Rose was in the womb. It's possible this decision by British healthcare workers may have resulted in Rose becoming what some call a slow child. Rose grew obese in school and was bullied for that. She had little interest in studies and was an outcast. Some people believe this was all because of the prenatal injury. Rose's mother Daisy suffered from extreme depression as a result of those electric shock treatments. If that wasn't bad enough, her father, Bill, was said to be a violent, paranoid schizophrenic who beat the women in the house. Rosie was sometimes called Dozy Rosie, dozy as in slow thinking. And young Rosie wasn't even allowed to play outside, they just walked around the garden. They didn't play in the garden, just walked around all sort of stiff-armed. They weren't allowed out of the wall, said one person who knew the family. Some reports say that the father would at times make wife and daughter clean the carpet with a toothbrush. Rose was never fully honest about this time in her life, adding, "You know, there was this man in a dark cape and dark hat, almost a shadow following her as a child when she walked, and that was about as near as she'd get to talking about her father." Other reports that she was raped by her father as a child, and Rose herself told the court that she had been raped by 2 different men in her youth. In a recording with police, Fred later would say her father was making love to her, she was more evil than he was. The family eventually moved to Gloucestershire, and we will get to how Rose would meet Fred. Prior to the murderers meeting and Fred moving to the same county, he met an already pregnant Scottish runaway stripper/prostitute called Rena Costello. Together they moved to Scotland and she became Rena West. In time Fred got her pregnant again. Fred worked as an ice cream seller to support his family. The couple then took a girl as a nanny, a 16-year-old Anne McFall. Fred had seen her crying in the streets and invited her to spend the day in his ice cream van. Fred then fell out with drunken and violent Rena and moved to Gloucester after he killed a 4-year-old boy with his van. He wasn't suspected of doing it on purpose, but reports say he feared locals would be angry with him. He took the 2 kids with him. Fred found work at a local slaughterhouse, which is where some say he developed a strange fascination with dismemberment and mutilation. 16-year-old McFall soon followed Fred. He got McFall pregnant, and she wanted for him to stay with her, but Fred wasn't keen on this idea and killed McFall instead. Fred later told police he even told his father about the story, but no one ever took it seriously. Truly, the father and son were made from the same cloth. As for Fred and Rena, she came to visit her children and try and take custody. But thing didn't end so well. Rena was never heard from again. The story is a long and chaotic one, but she was dismembered and buried in Fred's garden. According to Fred, like all his victims, he suffered their hauntings. Fred moved on, and this time, he met a 15-year-old girl who had a thing for older men. Her name was Rose. The 28-year-old Fred met her while she was hanging around the bus station. The two became acquainted, and soon, Rose was part-time nanny for Fred's 2 kids, Charmaine and Anne-Marie. This took a lot of gifts and persuasion, but Fred got his way. Rose even introduced Fred to her own parents. The mother said Fred was a pathological liar, and the father threatened to get the social services involved. Rose refused to distance herself from Fred. As a result, she was banished from her family home. She then moved in with Fred and became pregnant and put on social care. Fred was soon in prison for petty crimes, and Rose had her child. She was now looking after 3 children, who it was said she violently abused often. Once time she tied Charmaine, the child Rena was pregnant with, before she met Fred, naked to a chair, gagging and beating her. The young child would never be seen again. Charmaine's body was found years later, Rose having killed the young girl while Fred was in prison, telling the other girls that her mother had taken her away. Fred and Rose were married after all this, and they moved to an address that might be one of the most noted in history, 25 Cromwell Street. The couple had another kid, but times were hard. With all those children, Rose began a new enterprise, selling her body. It said she slept with men for money that she met on the street, but also some of Fred's workmates, and sometimes men who were lodging at their house. This just got out of control, and soon, she was doing acts for people with fetishes and was beaten and tied up. Rose would later say she was forced into these acts by Fred. As time went by, they now had 8 children. Some of different colors, as some of the fathers were clients of different ethnicities. Despite Fred being very much a maniac, some survivors who were abused said Rose was the beast of the house. She beat and abused the kids, with some running away and sleeping on the streets. One son recalls that she kicked and punched him in the head, even giving little cuts on his body with knives, and in all, the kids went to the emergency room 31 times for what were called accidents. And this is when they were really hurt, not just bruised up or suffering from bloody noses. The couple had a room in the basement where they would keep a mattress and instruments of torture as well as ropes. On one occasion, they took one of the daughters down there and did despicable things to her. It's reported that Rose told her daughter afterwards, "Everybody does it to every girl, it's a father's job, don't worry, and don't say anything to anybody." This girl, Anne-Marie, was one of the children not murdered by her parents. She ran away at 15 and later told the press that her uncle, John West, had raped her at least 300 times at that house. We must try and understand the regime of that household. It was very much sexually orientated there, and we were never told that anything that was happening was not a normal family environment. Once arrested, John West killed himself while awaiting trial. Even one of the lodgers, who'd seen what was going on or taken part, later killed himself. So, didn't anyone suspect anything? Well, the children were too young and afraid to do anything. The Wests did once pick up a young hitchhiker, tie her up, and rape her. The 17-year-old girl told the authorities the 2 Wests were charged with assault, indecent assault, actual bodily harm and rape, but the system, once again, failed and let these monsters on the streets. They were given a fine of £50. When the girl found out, she tried to kill herself. We can't go into every murder from here, but they involved young girls being picked up from the streets, abducted, or invited to become a lodger. They were often taken to the cellar, where they would be masked, sometimes with tubes stuck into the nostrils, so they could breathe, and suspended in the air using a contraption. They were hung up like animals, and all manner of horrible things happened to them. They were then killed. The bodies were almost always found, arms, feet, fingers, kneecaps, missing. Forensic pathologists said it was hard to say what parts were taken while the children were alive, or if all the dismemberment took place after they were killed. One of the victims was Lucy Partington, the cousin of well-known British novelist Martin Amis. In sad detail he talks about her disappearance in his autobiography. Other lodgers, often from care homes, were sexually abused but got out of the house. As all this went on, one of their own kids, Heather, the firstborn, began to confide in other students on what was happening in their house, saying her parents had quite strange sexual proclivities. When it got back to the children's parents about what Heather had said, she was not seen again. The remaining kids told police and media later in life that their parents would threaten them if they said anything about what happened in the house, telling them that they would end up under the patio like Heather. Fred and Rose said this as if it was a family joke. They even put a table on the patio where the kids were asked to sit when people came around to visit the house. The rest of the children kept quiet, but things just kept getting worse. Even though the children kept their promise, the brave girl did not keep quiet. Enough was enough. She told her friend what had happened, and the friend told her mom, who then told police. The girl was put into care with 4 other children. Fred was accused of rape and Rose as an accomplice, but the daughter wouldn't testify. This would not be long before the news spread into the minds of the British public. Police could quite easily put 2 and 2 together. When the investigation started, with missing wives, child rapes, kids going missing from the area, you didn't have to be Sherlock Holmes to figure that something was wrong in Gloucester, but it was a long investigation. The kids even told the cops about the family joke, the one with the punchline that said you'll end up under the patio if you breathe a word to the police. When they went to investigate the house and check the patio, bodies of 9 girls were eventually found buried in the garden and under the cellar, and one under the bathroom. Another victim, one of Fred's pregnant lover, was found in the house they had lived in before. Police told the press that victims had suffered extreme violent and degrading sexual activity before they were killed. Even before this, Fred knew he was caught. He called his mother and said, "I've done something really bad. I want you to go to the papers and make as much money as you can." He initially admitted to killing only Heather, saying Rose was not involved in the murder. Fred West's low IQ is evident. If you listen to the interview tapes, he slowly admits to more murders. At one point he is asked if there is one more body. He replies by saying, "There are 3 bodies, no, I mean 2. He changed his story many times and eventually told police he had killed as many as 20 people, which has led to ongoing investigations in England and Scotland, and is a strong belief West was behind many missing young girls. He did once admit in a tape recording, "I keep souvenirs." Rose was later arrested after Fred changed his statement, first saying Rose was involved, then saying Rose was the only one responsible. He told police, "I didn't kill Heather, I loved Heather." He said he no longer wanted to take the rap, saying Rose was sick for cutting up young girls. He even said he had no idea about the murders until Rose told him. But on some occasions, he witnessed Rose torturing the girls to the point of death. We may never know the truth, but police did know from forensic evidence the murder of Charmaine happened when Fred was in prison. On January 1, 1995, Fred West hanged himself in his cell while still awaiting trial. He left a note saying, "In loving memory, Fred West, Rose West, rest in peace where no shadow falls, in perfect peace. He waits for Rose, his wife." The courts heard from victims that it was Rose who had been the one who instigated the violence and pushed it too far. Another girl said that Fred had abducted her for Rose's gratification. One of their children even said he had witnessed Rose stomp on Heather's head until she was lifeless. Rose told the courts a very different story, that she was forced by Fred to have sex with people and do despicable things. However, the trauma will live on. In 1999, Anne-Marie, one of the surviving kids, tried to jump off a bridge into a river but was rescued close to death. She later said, "People say I am lucky to have survived, but I wish I had died. I can still taste the fear, still feel the pain. It's like going back to being a child again." The newspaper said the public at the time couldn't bear to read the news, and journalists were told not to go into details about what happened to those strung up in that sadistic torture chamber. 25 Cromwell Street was demolished by authorities. In this sordid and heartbreaking tale here, were Fred and Rose equally depraved, or was one worse than the other? Let us know in the comments. Be sure to watch our other video about John Wayne Gacy, the clown who terrorized a small town. Thanks for watching, and as always, don't forget to like, share and subscribe. Till next time.